More on Typhoon Vongfong in the Philippines. Buena Bernal joins us now from Manila. Buena, Philippine officials have called for safe distancing inside the temporary shelters for people who've had to evacuate because of the typhoon. How much of a challenge is this?
It's certainly a twofold blow for the Philippines as the country is hit by Typhoon Vongfong while the world is fighting a pandemic. You have to understand, one, even the conduct of evacuation itself from past experiences has been a challenge. We've seen this in recent typhoons. We've seen it in larger, more historic natural disasters. Haiyan in 2013. Even the eruption of Taal volcano last February, where despite advisories sounding the alarm, you still have residents who opt to stay in their homes, even in certain high-risk areas. So even on the level of evacuation, that's already a challenge. Now, it's going to be a tall order, even harder, given the COVID-19 pandemic. While the Philippines is no stranger to typhoons, the country experiences an average of 20 typhoons each year. There are now layers of precautionary measures such as decontamination and, yes, safe distancing that's now on top of disaster response efforts such as evacuation. So the government says safe distancing will be implemented, but this will be done on a per family basis. And usually these are schools and government-owned sports centers that are repurposed as evacuation centers. Some have partition tents, so safe distancing will be easier, but others don't. The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council did assure the public that in affected areas, they will not be using COVID-19 facilities as evacuation centers. Now, another concern, if safe distancing protocols are to be enforced, you will expect that evacuation centers will be able to accommodate a more limited number of people. Now, of course, there are private sector players pitching in, including the church. This happens every time a disaster strikes in the country. Church facilities are repurposed as evacuation centers. And finally, this also presents another expense for the government, a government that's already conducting a cash distribution program on a massive scale because of the lockdown measures that have impacted income sources for the informal sector. It's conducting cash distribution initially for 23 million people, and now on the second tranche for 11 million, or families, I should say, who will receive $100 to $160 a month. So as measures to combat COVID-19 are enforced, including the suspension of work with a few exemptions, there are sectors that are hit hard, informal sector workers who rely on daily wages, and now this typhoon for those areas in more susceptible high-risk areas, those with houses made of light materials, those with high-value crops about to be harvested. This certainly presents another layer of suffering for them.
Indeed, lots of challenges there. Thank you very much for that. Buena Bernal speaking to us from Manila.